June 17, 1944. A captured American M4 Sherman tank sat in a makeshift German inspection depot near Caen, Normandy, its olive drab hull illuminated by the early morning sun. Oberst Friedrich Weber of the Wehrmacht's Technical Intelligence Division stood before it, clipboard in hand, certain that within hours his team would document yet another example of inferior Allied engineering. Gentlemen, today we will catalog all the design flaws that make this American tank so easy to destroy on the battlefield, he announced to the gathered engineers. The irony was that this vehicle, designated T-34897 by its American crew, had traversed over 1,200 miles of combat operations without a single mechanical failure before being abandoned after taking a direct artillery hit. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. What these German engineers would discover over the next 72 hours would fundamentally challenge not only their understanding of American industrial capability, but also the entire foundation of German engineering philosophy that had dominated military thinking since before the war began. Major Hans Keller stepped forward, running his hand along the Sherman's hull. At 43, Keller was one of Germany's most respected tank designers, having contributed to both the Panzer IV and Tiger tank programs. His thick-rimmed glasses and perpetually furrowed brow gave him the appearance of a stern university professor rather than a military officer. First impression, Herr Oberst? American crude workmanship, as expected, Keller said, pointing to the casting seams visible on the hull. Look at these welds. No German factory would permit such aesthetically displeasing work. Beside him, Hauptmann Kurt Müller, a production engineer from the Henschel Tank Works in Kassel, nodded in agreement. The Americans clearly favor quantity over quality. Their industrial doctrine lacks discipline. The third member of the inspection team, Dr. Werner Schmidt, remained silent. As a civilian metallurgist who had spent 3 years studying at MIT before the war, Schmidt had a more nuanced view of American manufacturing capabilities than his military colleagues. Oberst Weber checked his watch. You have until 1800 hours to complete the initial assessment. I expect a preliminary report on my desk by morning. The Führer's headquarters is particularly interested in verification of our intelligence regarding American production numbers. They claim to be building 2,000 of these machines monthly, which our high command believes is propaganda. As Weber departed, the 3 German specialists began their methodical examination of the Sherman. Their process would follow the standard technical intelligence protocol: external assessment, powertrain analysis, armor evaluation, weapons systems, and finally, an assessment of battlefield survivability. Captain Roger Barton of the U.S. Army's 2nd Armored Division had named this particular Sherman Steel Savior when it was assigned to his crew in England 6 months earlier. The tank had survived the landing at Omaha Beach, pushed inland through the hedgerows, and participated in 3 major engagements before an 88mm shell disabled its left track, forcing the crew to abandon it during a tactical withdrawal. The German recovery team had found it relatively intact, making it an ideal specimen for technical analysis. Keller directed the team's attention to the tank's suspension system, American Christie-derived suspension. Inferior to our torsion bar system, but simpler to manufacture and repair, I must admit. Muller was already examining the power plant access panels. Let's see this 4GAA engine they're using. Our intelligence suggests it's a modified aircraft engine, which would explain its unreliability. It took 4 soldiers to remove the engine deck plates, revealing the massive V8 power plant beneath. Dr. Schmidt immediately noted something unusual. Gentlemen, observe the accessibility. Every component can be reached without removing adjacent systems. Keller snorted dismissively. That's because American maintenance crews lack the training for complex repair procedures. They need everything simplified. Schmidt disagreed. Perhaps, but consider the battlefield implications. A simplified maintenance procedure means shorter downtime. He pointed to several components. Look at these quick-release fittings. And here, standardized bolt patterns. This isn't crude engineering, it's deliberate design philosophy. By midday, the team had removed several major components for closer inspection. What they discovered increasingly contradicted their preconceptions. The Sherman's transmission, A particular focus for Muller revealed engineering choices that left him confused. The gear ratios are inefficient by our standards, he noted, but the manufacturing tolerances are remarkably consistent. And these materials, he held up a transmission gear. This should be wearing much faster than it is. Hauptmann Muller had spent 3 years at the Maybach Engine Works before the war, specializing in the complex transmissions that powered Germany's Panzer Force. The sophisticated Maybach HL-230 engine that powered the Tiger tank represented the pinnacle of German engineering, a handcrafted masterpiece of precision. But it also required nearly 3,500 man-hours to produce and demanded specialized maintenance teams. As the afternoon progressed, Dr. Schmidt methodically collected samples from various components for metallurgical testing. His portable analysis kit allowed preliminary field assessments, and the results were troubling him. The Americans are using alloys we've deemed unnecessary for tank production, he muttered. Look at these bushings, copper lead instead of pure copper. More expensive, but significantly more durable. Keller, who had been examining the main gun stabilization system, joined the conversation. Their gun stabilizer is primitive compared to theoretical designs our research division proposed in 1941. But it works reliably, Schmidt countered. And look, they're using standardized electric motors identical to those in their aircraft. They're sacrificing theoretical performance for parts commonality. A pattern was emerging that none of the 3 Germans had anticipated. The Sherman wasn't designed to be the best tank possible. It was designed to be the most producible and maintainable tank possible. As evening approached, the team gathered their initial findings. The preliminary report would focus on 5 key areas: powertrain, suspension, armament, armor, and production methodology. But already, their conversations had shifted tone. How many Tiger tanks did we produce last month? Muller asked quietly. 25, Keller replied. Perhaps 30 with the accelerated schedule. And how many Panthers? 120, give or take. Muller looked at the disassembled Sherman. And they're making 2,000 of these. Every month. The implications hung in the air, unspoken but understood. Germany's vaunted engineering superiority was creating magnificent machines that couldn't be produced in significant numbers, while America was creating adequate machines in quantities that boggled the mind. The next morning, the team reconvened with fresh perspectives. Overnight, Dr. Schmidt had conducted detailed metallurgical analyses, and his findings further complicated the narrative. The armor plate chemistry is fascinating, Schmidt reported. They're using higher nickel content than we expected, with more uniform hardening. It's not as thick as our Panther's front glacis, but the manufacturing consistency is remarkable. Every plate we've tested falls within a 5% hardness deviation. Our plants struggle to maintain 15% consistency with current production pressures. Keller, who had spent the early hours examining the turret mechanisms, seemed less dismissive than the previous day. Their turret rotation system is electrical rather than hydraulic. Less powerful, but far less likely to fail in combat conditions. And the manual backup can be operated by a single crewman. Muller emerged from beneath the tank, coveralls stained with transmission fluid. I've identified something extraordinary in the powertrain design. Look at this. He held up a transmission component. This part will eventually fail. It's designed to. But when it does, it doesn't damage the surrounding components. The Americans are building deliberate wear points that can be quickly replaced rather than designing for theoretical longevity. This revelation struck at the heart of German engineering philosophy. German tanks were designed to be technological marvels, the best possible machines based on available knowledge. Theoretical perfection was the goal, even if it resulted in production complications or maintenance challenges. By contrast, the Sherman was designed with a fundamentally different philosophy. What good is a perfect tank that breaks down, can't be fixed in the field, or can't be produced in sufficient numbers? As the inspection continued, they encountered Sergeant Wilhelm Brandt, a Panzer IV commander with 3 years of Eastern Front experience. Brandt had been assigned to observe the technical assessment. With respect, Herr Major, Brandt addressed Keller. May I offer a combat perspective? Keller nodded curtly. A tank that runs is better than a superior tank that doesn't, Brandt said simply. My first Panzer IV was a masterpiece, until a fuel pump failed near Kharkov. We had no replacement parts. We abandoned a perfectly good tank with a functioning gun because a single specialized component failed. Brandt continued, warming to his subject. Last winter, our company had 5 Panthers. Magnificent machines. But by January, we were down to 2, not from enemy action, but from mechanical failures. Frozen transmissions, overheated engines, broken final drives. Our maintenance crews were excellent, but they lacked parts and specialized equipment. This frontline perspective added weight to what the technical team was discovering. The Sherman wasn't just designed for mass production. It was designed for battlefield sustainability, a concept that German tank development had increasingly sacrificed in pursuit of qualitative superiority. By the afternoon of the second day, Oberst Weber returned for a progress update. The team's findings were beginning to challenge the established narrative. You're suggesting the Americans have deliberately engineered a mediocre tank? Weber asked incredulously. Not mediocre, Herr Oberst, Schmidt clarified. Optimized. They've made calculated compromises to emphasize reliability, maintainability, and producibility. For example, their engine operates at only 80% of its theoretical capacity. This reduces performance slightly, but doubles service intervals. Weber looked unconvinced. The Führer will not be interested in American engineering philosophy. He wants concrete assessments of capability. That's just it, sir, Muller interjected. We've been measuring the wrong capabilities. We compare armor thickness, gun penetration, and engine power. But we should be measuring availability rates, mean time between failures, and field repair times. By those metrics, the Sherman is formidable. On the third day, the team conducted a complete reassembly of the Sherman. This process revealed perhaps the most significant aspect of the American design philosophy, standardization. Every bolt on this access panel is identical, Keller noted with a mixture of admiration and disbelief. Same thread pattern, same head size, same length. Our Panther has 17 different bolt types in the equivalent assembly. Schmidt, who had been comparing various components with reference manuals, made another discovery. Many of these parts are identical to those used in American trucks and tractors. They're using existing civilian production lines for tank components. This approach stood in stark contrast to German practices, where tank components were largely specialized and produced on dedicated production lines. The implications for industrial efficiency were profound. By mid-afternoon, the team was comparing notes on repair procedures. Keller had obtained the American maintenance manual captured with the tank, while Muller referenced the equivalent documentation for the Panther. Field replacement of a Sherman final drive assembly. For hours with standard tools, Keller read. Panther equivalent. Factory repair only. Minimum 18 hours with specialized equipment. Sherman engine replacement. 6 hours with a 10-ton hoist, Muller countered. Panther, 16 hours minimum, requiring engine compartment disassembly. The pattern continued across virtually every major component. The Sherman was designed to be maintained by mechanics with minimal specialized training, using standard tools, and with repairs possible in field conditions. The German tanks, by contrast, often required factory-level maintenance for significant repairs. As they completed the reassembly, another visitor arrived at the inspection depot. General Lieutenant Heinrich Bauer, a senior officer from the Army Weapons Office, had been sent to evaluate the team's findings personally. I understand your report contains some unorthodox conclusions, Bauer stated, his tone making clear his skepticism. Keller, whose initial dismissiveness had given way to reluctant respect, explained their findings. Herr General, we began this assessment expecting to confirm American industrial inferiority. Instead, we've discovered a different approach to tank warfare, one based not on creating the perfect tank, but on creating a continuously available fighting force. Bauer frowned. Are you suggesting their approach is superior? Not necessarily superior in absolute terms, Schmidt interjected diplomatically, but potentially more effective in this specific conflict. To demonstrate, Muller presented a set of calculations. If we assume our Panthers have a 70% operational readiness rate, and the Americans maintain 90% with their Shermans, then their effective force multiplication is 1.28 to 1 before considering production numbers. When we factor in their production advantage of approximately 16 to 1, The operational tank advantage becomes approximately 20-1. Bauer's expression darkened. These figures cannot be correct. I verified them personally, Herr General, Schmidt said quietly. And they align with field reports from the Eastern Front regarding our operational readiness rates. The implications were becoming clear. Germany was producing numerically inferior tanks that were frequently unavailable for combat due to maintenance issues, while the Allies were flooding the battlefield with adequate machines that rarely broke down. On the final evening of the assessment, Keller was examining the Sherman's tracks when he noticed Sergeant Brandt sitting alone, smoking a cigarette. "Something troubling you, Sergeant?" Keller asked. Brandt exhaled slowly. "I was just thinking about my crew, Herr Major. My gunner, Fischer, was a watchmaker before the war, perfect for the delicate fire controls of our Panzer. My driver, Hoffman, was a racing car mechanic. He can coax performance from any engine." Keller nodded, unsure where this was leading. "But the Americans don't need watchmakers and racing mechanics," Brandt continued. "Their tanks are designed to be operated by farmers, factory workers, and shopkeepers with 6 weeks of training. We're fighting a nation that can turn civilians into tankers faster than we can train our specialists." This observation touched on something fundamental. The Sherman represented more than just an engineering approach. It represented a different conception of modern warfare. America was fighting an industrial war, while Germany was still fighting a craftsman's war. The final report, completed on the 4th morning, contained conclusions that would be unwelcome at the highest levels of German command. Yet the evidence was undeniable. 1. The M4 Sherman achieved 90% mechanical reliability through deliberate engineering compromises favoring simplicity and standardization. 2. Field repair times averaged 80% less than equivalent German tanks due to accessibility, component standardization, and simplified systems. 3. American production methodology emphasized consistent manufacturing tolerance over theoretical performance, resulting in lower performance variability. 4. The Sherman's design philosophy prioritized combat availability over peak capability, recognizing that actual battlefield effectiveness was determined by aggregate available firepower rather than individual vehicle superiority. 5. American industrial capacity, combined with their design approach, created an effectively insurmountable material advantage that technical superiority alone could not overcome. As Oberst Weber reviewed the document, his expression grew increasingly troubled. This report contradicts years of our propaganda about American technical inferiority. It contradicts our own assumptions as well, Schmidt admitted. We've been designing tanks as if we were competing in an engineering exposition rather than fighting a global war. Weber sighed heavily. "I will submit your findings, but I doubt they will influence our production priorities. The leadership is too committed to the current approach." Indeed, the report would eventually reach Albert Speer's ministry, where its implications would be recognized but ultimately ignored. Germany would continue producing incremental refinements of increasingly sophisticated tanks in numbers too small to affect the war's outcome. Meanwhile, American factories continued manufacturing 2,000 Sherman tanks each month. While German production struggled under the combined pressures of material shortages and Allied bombing, American production continued to accelerate. For every Panther that reached the front lines, approximately 24 Shermans arrived on the Allied side. 6 weeks after the technical assessment, Major Keller found himself in conversation with Dr. Ferdinand Porsche, one of Germany's most prominent automotive designers and the creator of the Tiger P tank. "Your report on the Sherman was most illuminating," Porsche commented. "It reminds me of something Henry Ford told me when I visited his facilities in 1937. I was admiring the precision machining of an engine block, and Ford said, 'Precision is important, but interchangeability is everything.'" Keller nodded. "We've designed our tanks to win battles. The Americans have designed their industrial system to win wars." By September 1944, the practical impact of these different philosophies was becoming evident on the battlefield. The 2nd SS Panzer Division reported that while their Panthers could destroy Shermans at a ratio of 4-1 in direct engagements, they frequently arrived at battles with only 40% of their nominal strength due to mechanical breakdowns. The Americans, by contrast, consistently operated at 85 to 90% of their paper strength. Oberstleutnant Ernst Mühlenkamp, a decorated panzer commander, summarized the situation in a letter to the Army Weapons Office. "We are creating magnificent tigers to fight against adequate horses. But they have 100 horses for each of our tigers, and our tigers are frequently lame." In October 1944, as Allied forces pushed toward the German border, Sergeant Brandt's Panther tank broke down near Aachen, its third transmission failure in 2 months. As his crew worked frantically to repair it, a column of Sherman tanks appeared on the ridge above their position. "American engineering may be inferior," Brandt muttered as he ordered his crew to abandon their tank. "But their tanks are still advancing while ours are not." The ultimate vindication of the American approach came not on the battlefield but in the production statistics. By war's end, the United States had manufactured over 49,000 Sherman tanks, more than twice the number of all German tank production combined. Dr. Schmidt, who survived the war and later worked for a major American automobile manufacturer, would reflect in his 1956 memoir, "The Sherman tank taught me that engineering excellence isn't defined by theoretical performance, but by actual effectiveness. The perfect solution that arrives too late or can't be maintained is ultimately inferior to the adequate solution that works consistently when needed." Major Keller never saw the end of the war. He died in February 1945 when Allied bombs struck the research facility where he was working on the next generation of German tanks. His final report, found among his personal papers, contained a prophetic observation: "We have been defeated not by American engineering, but by American industrial philosophy. They designed for the war they had to fight. We designed for the war we wanted to fight." The Sherman tank represented a fundamental shift in military engineering, emphasizing the system rather than the individual platform, prioritizing the probable over the possible, and recognizing that in modern industrial warfare, the ability to maintain a continuous presence on the battlefield ultimately matters more than achieving technical superiority. Today, military historians recognize that the Sherman's true innovation wasn't any particular technical feature, but rather its alignment of design, production, and battlefield sustainability into an integrated system. The tank that never broke down wasn't actually invulnerable to mechanical failure. It was simply designed to minimize those failures and make them rapidly reparable when they occurred. The Sherman's legacy lives on in modern military procurement doctrine, where life cycle maintenance, field repairability, and production scalability are considered alongside performance metrics. As Brigadier General James Collins of the U.S. Army Ordnance Corps would later observe, the lesson of the Sherman wasn't that quality doesn't matter, but rather that quality must be measured by the entire system's performance, not just the platform's peak capability. In the end, the German engineers who examined that captured Sherman tank in Normandy discovered something more significant than mechanical details. They glimpsed a different way of thinking about industrial warfare, one that prioritized systems over platforms, sustainability over perfection, and practical effectiveness over theoretical superiority. It was a lesson that would reshape military engineering philosophy for generations to come. Back in America, the story of the Sherman's development revealed equally important insights. The tank's chief designer, Major General Gladion M. Barnes of the U.S. Army Ordnance Department, had established design principles that seemed counterintuitive to traditional military thinking. "A tank in the depot is worth nothing," Barnes had written in a 1942 memo. "A tank that can be repaired overnight is worth 3 that require a week of maintenance." This philosophy extended beyond mere mechanical design to the entire logistical system supporting the Sherman. Standardized parts meant simplified supply chains. Modular components meant damaged tanks could serve as parts donors for others. Simplified maintenance procedures meant repairs could be performed closer to the front lines. Lieutenant Colonel James Thompson, who oversaw Sherman production at the Detroit Tank Arsenal, had implemented another revolutionary concept: design feedback loops. "Every month, we receive reports from maintenance units in the field," he explained to visiting War Department officials in 1943. "Design modifications are implemented based on actual battlefield experience, not theoretical improvements." This approach stood in stark contrast to German practices, where design changes were often driven by engineering theories rather than field feedback. The result was that American tanks evolved rapidly in response to real-world conditions, while German tanks evolved toward increasingly complex theoretical ideals. By early 1945, the practical results of these different philosophies had become apparent to German tank commanders. Oberstleutnant Otto Carius, a decorated Tiger tank ace with over 150 claimed kills, noted in his combat report, "We wait weeks for specialized parts while the Americans simply replace entire tank components in hours. Their approach is inelegant but devastatingly effective." The Sherman's influence extended beyond World War II. In Korea, modified Shermans once again demonstrated their reliability under harsh conditions. During the Vietnam War, American military procurement began emphasizing the mean time between failures as a critical metric, directly influenced by lessons learned from the Sherman program. When American and Soviet military theorists examined tank warfare after World War II, they drew different conclusions. The Soviets, impressed by German engineering, initially pursued qualitative superiority in their tank designs. However, by the 1960s, they had shifted toward the American model of reliability, standardization, and mass production. The legendary T-54-55 tank series, the most produced tank in history with over 100,000 units built, owed more to Sherman design philosophy than to German concepts. Major General Robert J. Sunnell, who served with the Armor Center at Fort Knox in the 1970s, observed, "The Sherman taught us that combat power isn't determined by what a weapons system can do under ideal conditions, but rather by what it can actually deliver consistently under battlefield conditions." This principle guided the development of the M1 Abrams tank in the late 1970s. While incorporating advanced technologies, the Abrams program emphasized field maintenance, component accessibility, and operational readiness above all other metrics. When the tank was tested in desert conditions prior to the Gulf War, it achieved readiness rates exceeding 90%, a direct legacy of lessons learned from the Sherman. Captain Michael Reardon, who commanded Sherman tanks during the Allied advance into Germany, later reflected, "The Germans thought they were building the best tanks in the world. We knew we were building enough good tanks to win the war. It turns out good enough in sufficient numbers is better than excellent in insufficient numbers." Perhaps the most telling overall tribute to the Sherman's design philosophy came from an unexpected source. In 1985, during a NATO equipment exchange program, German Bundeswehr tank commanders were given the opportunity to examine archival materials from the war. Oberst Wilhelm Becker, after reviewing the 1944 technical assessment of the captured Sherman, wrote, "The Germans of that era failed to understand that excellence in war is not defined by theoretical performance, but by delivered results." The Sherman delivered results. The lessons of the Sherman tank continue to influence military procurement and design. Lieutenant General Thomas W. Garrett, addressing the Army War College in 2018, used the Sherman as a case study in effective systems thinking. The Sherman wasn't designed to win tank versus tank duels. It was designed to win campaigns and, ultimately, the war. Modern military planners must similarly consider not just platform capabilities, but system effectiveness. This philosophy has become embedded in modern American military doctrine. The concept of good enough technology deployed at scale has repeatedly proven more effective than perfect technology deployed in limited numbers. From the ubiquitous Jeep of World War II to the M16 rifle of Vietnam and the MRAP vehicles of recent conflicts, American military equipment has consistently emphasized reliability, maintainability, and mass production over theoretical performance metrics. Dr. Emily Richardson, a military historian specializing in industrial mobilization, summarized the Sherman's legacy. "The triumph of the Sherman tank wasn't a triumph of American technology over German technology. It was a triumph of American systems thinking over German component thinking. The Germans created magnificent individual tanks. The Americans created an overwhelming tank warfare system. This systems approach extended to the training of maintenance personnel. The U.S. Army established standardized maintenance schools that could rapidly train mechanics on Sherman repair procedures. A 6-week course was sufficient to prepare a maintenance technician for field service, compared to the months or years of very specialized training required for German tank maintenance. Captain William Foster of the Army Ordnance Department noted in a 1944 report, "Our maintenance training philosophy mirrors our tank design philosophy. We emphasize practical results over theoretical perfection. A mechanic who can actually fix a broken tank in the field is worth more than one who perfectly understands every engineering principle but takes twice as long to complete repairs." As warfare continues to evolve, the fundamental lesson of the Sherman remains relevant. Military effectiveness isn't determined by technological superiority alone, but by the integration of technology, production capability, maintenance systems, and operational doctrine into a cohesive whole. The tank that never broke down succeeded not because it was indestructible, but because it was part of a system designed for continuous battlefield presence rather than intermittent excellence. 7 decades after those German engineers puzzled over a captured Sherman tank in Normandy, military planners worldwide still grapple with the same essential question. Is it better to have the theoretically superior weapon that might not be available when needed, or the adequate weapon that is always ready? History suggests that in the crucible of prolonged conflict, sustainability ultimately trumps superiority. The Sherman tank stands as a testament to this principle, a weapon that changed the course of history not by being the best tank in the world, but by being the right tank at the right time in the right numbers. Its legacy isn't found in the specifications of its armor or the power of its engine, but in the philosophy it embodied. That true military effectiveness comes from systems designed for the realities of war, not the ideals of engineering. Another aspect of the Sherman's success lay in its adaptability. When combat experience revealed vulnerabilities, the basic chassis proved capable of accommodating numerous modifications. The Sherman evolved into flame-throwing variants, mine-clearing vehicles, bridge carriers, and amphibious tanks. This adaptability stemmed directly from its modular design. Colonel Harold Dawson, who served as a liaison between frontline armor units and production facilities, explained, "The Sherman's greatest strength may be its capacity for evolution. We've modified the suspension, upgraded the armament, enhanced the armor, all without disrupting production flow." This contrasted sharply with German tank development, where new challenges often triggered completely new designs rather than modifications to existing platforms. While the Germans created an expanding family of different tank types, each with unique maintenance requirements, the Americans continuously improved a basic design that maintained compatibility across variants. Staff Sergeant James Miller, a maintenance chief with the 3rd Armored Division, noted in his war diary, "When we receive a new Sherman variant, 80% of the maintenance procedures remain unchanged." The Germans seemed to redesign everything from scratch with each iteration. The psychological impact of the Sherman's reliability extended beyond statistics. American tank crews developed confidence in their equipment. Lieutenant Paul Jackson of the 2nd Armored Division wrote, "Our Sherman may not be the toughest tank out here, but it always starts in the morning. That reliability gives us freedom to focus on fighting." Conversely, German tank crews increasingly suffered from anxiety about mechanical failures. A captured Panther commander confessed, "We spent as much time worrying about our transmission as about enemy tanks. Each hill became a mechanical challenge." This reliability differential affected strategic planning as well. General George S. Patton's rapid advance across France in 1944 would have been impossible without the Sherman's dependability. His famous quote, "Fixed fortifications are monuments to the stupidity of man," reflected a confidence in mobility that stemmed directly from the reliability of his armored forces. The Sherman's maintenance philosophy had another benefit. It created a force-wide mechanical competence. Because basic maintenance tasks were designed to be performed by typical crew members, the American Armored Force developed a practical understanding of tank mechanics. The final assessment of the Sherman's impact perhaps belongs to General Dwight D. Eisenhower, who wrote in his memoirs, "In mechanical endurance and ease of maintenance, the American tanks were so far superior to the German that the difference can only be described as qualitative." This statement inverts the traditional qualitative-quantitative dichotomy, that typically places German engineering as qualitatively superior. In Eisenhower's view, reliability itself represented a form of quality, perhaps the most important quality in sustained warfare. The humble Sherman, with its deliberately limited performance envelope, standardized components, and maintenance-friendly design, ultimately helped reshape our understanding of what constitutes excellence in military technology. It demonstrated that true combat effectiveness emerges not from theoretical performance metrics, but from the integration of design, production, maintenance, and operational doctrine into a cohesive system optimized for actual battlefield conditions. The German engineers who examined that captured Sherman in Normandy glimpsed this truth, even if their superiors failed to act on it. Their realization came too late to influence the war's outcome, but their assessment stands as a testament to the power of systems thinking over component excellence, a lesson that continues to influence military procurement and design philosophy into the 21st century. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II, and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.